The Trump-Ukraine stories get to a high point as Nancy Pelosi officially calls for a formal impeachment inquiry. And we're going to get into that story today. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and this is The Giraldo Show. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and you are listening to The Giraldo Show. Today, September 24th, 2019, I will be discussing the Ukraine story and Nancy Pelosi's breaking news that she will be launching a formal impeachment inquiry on President Donald Trump. So, the Ukraine story has been in the news recently. For those who don't know what it might be about, I'll go ahead and give a little bit of a rundown. There was a whistleblower that came out and revealed that Donald Trump was allegedly going to withhold foreign aid to Ukraine if they did not launch an official investigation on Joe Biden, and specifically on his son, Hunter Biden. So for those who do not know the story of Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden, I'll go ahead and explain it to you in a quick second. So in the spring of 2014, Joe Biden began planning his trip to Ukraine. Hunter Biden and his son took a position on the board of the country's largest private gas company, Burisma. He was reportedly paid up to $50,000 a month. There was a question of a possible conflict of interest, with Hunter Biden profiting in a country where his father was actively working with the government, and it was raised publicly at the time. Joe Biden said that he followed government ethics, regulations, and that his son was a private citizen who made his own decisions. There was also the Obama administration actually supported an investigation into the gas company because the owner, Mykola Zlochevsky, was close to the ousted president, and they had both fled the country. So basically what happened was that Hunter Biden got a job at the private gas company, the largest private gas company in the Ukraine, Burisma, and he was paid a lot of money. And it was interesting because Hunter Biden was known for not really doing much. He had gotten a discharge from the Navy for cocaine use. He had been a frequent drug user, and his only claim to fame was really being Joe Biden's son. So when he got this job at Burisma and was getting paid up to $50,000 a month, there was a lot of conflict. This is according to NPR with what the Bidens were doing with Ukraine. So the thing with Ukraine was that Joe Biden boasted about his work in Ukraine as a spokesperson for the White House and the West generally. What happened was that he called the Ukraine in 2016, and he made a trip in 2016, in March 2016, to Ukraine, and told the country's leaders that they had to get rid of the prosecutor if they wanted $1 billion in U.S. aid. Biden told this story last year at the Council on Foreign Relations. He said, quote, "You're not getting the $1 billion. I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money." Well, son of a blank, he got fired. So basically what happened there was that Joe Biden told the Ukraine government, if you do not fire this prosecutor that's prosecuting against my son, investigating against my son, I am not going to help the Ukraine in giving $1 billion in foreign aid. The Ukraine responded by saying, what power do you have? You're only the vice president. And then Biden allegedly but he said that he would give President Obama a call. Now, that story is pretty quid pro quo. Now, quid pro is Latin for a favor, and that's what the impeachment inquiry is being tried for against Donald Trump. What happened recently in the Ukraine, as I explained, a whistleblower allegedly said that Donald Trump was going to restrict foreign aid, or at least delay foreign aid, to the Ukraine unless they launched an investigation on Joe Biden and his son. Now, we don't know the full story yet. We don't even know if the whistleblower knew for a fact what that conversation was about. So we're not going to really know the facts until they continuously get released. Now, we do have a breaking news story that President Donald Trump will release his authorized conversation with the Ukrainian president. And he mentions that there is no quid pro quo in the conversation at all. So we're just going to have to wait until tomorrow, Wednesday, September 25th, 2019, to figure out what President Trump actually said to the president of the Ukraine. So it's very interesting that the Democrats in the House of Representatives are searching for an impeachment of Donald Trump, when they didn't really care too much about Joe Biden, when Joe Biden's statement was much more quid pro quo. It was much more directly inciting that Joe Biden would not help, or the United States would not help in giving $1 billion to the Ukraine. Well, the story allegedly is with Donald Trump that during the UN, when he went to speak, he gave foreign aid to the Ukraine, and it was just so happened to have been timed right after his conversation with the Ukrainian president. So that's really set up some red flags, especially with the Democratic Party, in that they said, we got you. We know that you definitely did quid pro quo. You withheld foreign aid until the president of the Ukraine said he could prosecute, and then President Trump released the foreign aid. Now, I don't know how much of that story I want to believe. Again, I do not know all the facts of the story. However, what I do know is that Donald Trump is not necessarily a huge thought leader. He doesn't really think too much about what he's actually saying. He just kind of says things. So there are two alternating storylines in this. The first storyline, Donald Trump being directly explicit, saying, look, if you don't investigate Joe Biden and his son, we are going to withdraw foreign aid from you. We're not going to give you the foreign aid that you guys need, that you guys request. So that's option one. Option two is Donald Trump saying, hey, president of Ukraine, it'd be really nice, it'd be really great if you could investigate Joe Biden. And the president of Ukraine says no. And then President Trump says, well, I think it still should be really great that you could do it. And then the president of Ukraine insisted in saying no. And then Donald Trump just gives him the foreign aid afterward because saying, okay, you're not corrupt. You're fine. I tend to believe the second story more just because I don't think Donald Trump really knows about, I guess I shouldn't say he doesn't know about. What I really mean to say is that President Trump is more likely to just say, it'd be really great if you could investigate him. I don't think he directly states, if you do not investigate Joe Biden, you are not going to get foreign aid. But again, I don't know the entire story. That's why we're waiting for his phone call conversation with the president of the Ukraine to come out. And we're just going to see what the story is. And we're going to see if impeachment is necessary, because I believe that if the president did do a quid pro quo with the Ukraine, directly using our tax dollars to threaten pretty much another country, I do think impeachment should be on the table. It's a crime, and it's a really horrible thing for a president to do that. Obviously, only two presidents in our country's history have been impeached. Bill Clinton was the most recent case, and Andrew Johnson was the first case. In both cases, neither president was taken out of office. So I don't think that the impeachment if there is an impeachment, it's going to lead to the removal of President Trump from office, if there even is an impeachment, which at this point, I don't really know what to believe from the Democratic Party, because they've really started spreading a lot of news that has been what Donald Trump would refer to as fake news. You've got the Russia collusion story. You've got the Brett Kavanaugh accusations. And I'll just go through my opinions on those stories real quick. So the Russian collusion, obviously, when President Trump surprised the United States by beating Hillary Clinton in the presidential nomination for 2016, the Democratic Party assumed that President Trump had to have had help from outside foreign agents, because in their mind there was no way that Hillary Clinton could have lost that election to Donald Trump, someone that the Democrats thought was a repulsive, misogynistic, sexist, racist, everything that the Democrats call him right now. They were calling him back in 2016, so they couldn't believe that Hillary Clinton could have actually lost to Donald Trump, but she did because of the Electoral College, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Electoral College has become such a big deal in the Democratic Party, because they don't understand that when you have three major cities in Chicago, New York City, and Los Angeles that are all Democratic and that have the most people in that condensed area than multiple cities in the United States combined, that popular vote is going to, let's say, for example, that the Electoral College is eliminated. If we only have three cities, then Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, we have those three cities that control the entire popular vote. Republicans in rural, smaller cities or rural, small towns are not going to have a chance at all to get their voice out. It's only going to be Democratic presidents if the Electoral College was completely eliminated, because the fact is that in Los Angeles, New York City, and in Chicago, it's completely Democratic. They're blue cities, and they have a huge amount of people condensed into those cities. So that's the importance of the Electoral College, is to make sure that every single state, every single vote does make a difference, because when you have people in Kansas or in Oklahoma or in Texas that don't necessarily have as many electoral college as many people, as California or New York, then the electoral college makes sure, okay, we're going to give you a certain amount of electoral votes so that your vote isn't undermined in comparison to California or to New York. So that's one of the big reasons why the Democratic Party has been so obsessed with attempting to get rid of the Electoral College. You see that a lot in the Democratic debates where they talk about we need to get rid of the Electoral College because we are a democracy, even though we are very clearly a democratic republic. That's why we had the popular vote at the beginning, but then that's also why we had the Electoral College, to make sure that 3 major cities don't control the entirety of an election cycle. 3 cities cannot determine 5% of an entire country's election. And then the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, that really isn't a lot about Donald Trump, but Donald Trump was the person who elected Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. Obviously, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, came out saying that Brett Kavanaugh had gang raped her in high school. No evidence had come out to support it. Her details of her remembering of details were wonky. She did not really remember anything. All of her witnesses could not collaborate on her story, some even flat out denying that a party even happened. And now the Democrats are once again trying to get Brett Kavanaugh with some recent sexual assault hearings, but I think those are probably going to start dying down because of the big news with Donald Trump now being in the talks of an impeachment. So I saw this a lot on Twitter. There's a lot of talk about, there was a hashtag impeach the MF, and MF is a condensed version of mother blank. I don't want to curse on the show because I don't personally like to curse, but I will if there's a necessity to. But I saw that a lot on Twitter, and it kind of just shows how the Democratic Party doesn't want to accept the fact that they lost the election. They've been calling for impeachment for the past 3 years. Right now, I think they have the most legitimate reason to impeach, considering the facts that we have right now. Because the Russia story, it would have been the most likely impeachment story. However, the examples and the story that was given was just so absurd that it was kind of difficult for anyone to really believe, besides the people who watch mainstream media like CNN or MSNBC. It was very difficult for anyone to really believe that Trump really had the smarts to collude with Russia, to call up Vladimir Putin and say that, hey, help me win this election, I'm going to help you out too. I don't think Donald Trump, I think he's doing a good job as president, but I don't think he's that intellectual leader that Democrats believe that Republicans hold him up to me. I think people in the conservative and the Republican Party, we like Donald Trump. We definitely want to see him reelected in 4 years, but we don't necessarily think he's the smartest person in the world. Obviously, there are smarter people, but again, I personally am a huge fan of Donald Trump. I'm very glad that he's our president right now. The economy is up and rising. For the moment, it doesn't look like it's going on the decline, but we're going to go ahead and see what happens, especially with this impeachment. So the breaking news was that Nancy Pelosi officially called for an impeachment inquiry. I made sure to mention that in the teaser, but I'm going to go ahead and explain a little bit of what is really happening. So Nancy Pelosi, a couple of hours ago, I made sure to record this right after the 4 o'clock timer that was set for the Democratic representatives, to get together and discuss whether impeachment was possible. So I made sure to record after that. It is currently 6:10, and it looks like Nancy Pelosi has officially stated that she wants to launch a formal impeachment inquiry. So bad news for Trump if there is clear and evidence of an impeachment, of a quid pro quo with Ukraine. Again, if there is a quid pro quo, I do think impeachment should not be on the table because Nancy Pelosi correctly states nobody is above the law, not even the president. And I agree with that. No matter how much you could like a president, you have to admit that when he commits a crime, he has to face the punishment. It can't be released like that because that would show a flaw in the justice system and everyone has to be tried equally, and so should the president. But that's only if impeachment actually happens. And again, I don't know if I want to believe at this moment. You might say that's because of bias or because of my conservative beliefs, but even if I were a moderate, I would be a little skeptical of the entire situation because you have a whistleblower that hasn't come forward before. Apparently this call took place a couple months back, hasn't come up before. He has had really zero evidence so far. He has just said that he's just claimed that Trump wanted to withdraw foreign aid from Ukraine if they didn't investigate Joe Biden. So not really any concrete evidence. And the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi are going on that whistleblower story. So again, we're not going to know anything until the official facts come out. We're starting to get some facts right now. Trump has officially said that he's going to release his phone call conversation with the president of Ukraine, and he claims that there is no quid pro quo. I believe him, but again, we're going to have to see what he actually said. Because for the Democrats, any little slip that Donald Trump might say could lead to an impeachment, even if he doesn't directly mention anything about him not giving foreign aid to Ukraine in exchange for Joe Biden getting investigated. Very interesting story today. I'm glad I was able to record this a little bit later just so that I could get all the information with Nancy Pelosi. I was able to explain Joe Biden to you and what Joe Biden did 3 years back in 2016, which to me is more of a criminal offense because he directly stated that if you do not fire the prosecutor, you're going to get denied $1 billion of foreign aid. That is more directly inciting the quid pro quo than Donald Trump is potentially doing. But again, I've mentioned this many times in the podcast, but it's all about what happens tomorrow when Trump releases that unedited phone call, or that's what he claims. He claims it's an authorized phone call conversation, a transcript that he's going to release. Personally, I don't think Democrats are going to buy it, even though it could be 100% true. Same thing happened with the Mueller report. They didn't buy that Trump didn't really collude with Russia. They still want to believe it, even though there is no evidence to support a collusion. They still want to persecute and impeach for obstruction of justice. So, really interesting story today. I'm glad I was able to promote it to the podcast today. I think that's going to be it for today's episode. So, in tomorrow's episode, once Trump's phone call conversation comes out, we're going to be recapping what happened in today's episode, and tomorrow I'm going to be going over the transcript of the Trump phone call, and we're going to see exactly what he said and the hopeful reaction of the Democrats, and we're going to see if impeachment is actually on the line and is going to be required. But that's going to be it for today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, make sure to give it a like and follow on any platform that you are listening to. This is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, Podbean, and more. I'm very glad to be able to spread my conservative views onto my audience, and I hope that anyone who listens is able to spread their views as well, and do not be afraid of the liberal or leftist people because they will try to bully you. But just remember, if you stand up to the bullies are going to stand down. So just remember, for people in the conservative movement, I want you to stand up because I don't want to be afraid anymore. I'm not afraid anymore. That's why I'm spreading my views out to everyone. I want to make sure that all the conservatives hear this loud and clear. I want to see more conservatives out there in the movement today. Come out of hiding. We will support you no matter what. From a conservative young person, I'm sure that if I see more conservative people stand up in my school, I would always make sure to stand up for them because I believe that they are doing the right thing. So again, that's it for today. My name is Sebastian Giraldo, and this is The Giraldo Show.